Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Fighting Matters. I have got two people with me that I'm so glad to see. I think one of them may be our first returning guest, returning champion, and another one back from an absolutely amazing adventure. I'm glad they're home safe and sound, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Stephan, why don't you get us started?
Hi, I'm Stephan Kesting, Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt. In the context of today's conversation, Masters of Biology, and I just got back from 30 days in the Arctic wilderness, didn't see anyone for 26 days, lost 20 pounds, and I did manage, my only recreation there was putting some videos online, sort of summarizing what was happening each day, and those are on the either Essential Wilderness YouTube channel or Instagram. So if you want to check out whether or not jiu-jitsu works against polar bears, or more importantly, whether or not the training that you do in jiu-jitsu helps translate into toughness and grit and perseverance in other areas of your life, that's a place to look.
Perfect. Clayton, hello. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks. This is my third Fighting Matters appearance. I am Dr. Clayton Green. I'm a board-certified dermatologist. I also have a PhD in microbiology. So I am the guy who has brought you a lot of educational content on keeping yourself clean and safe from things like staph and ringworm and herpes and whatnot. But today I'm here to share my experience as a practicing physician during the COVID pandemic and hopefully answer some questions about the physician side of things here in the U.S.
So how much were you getting paid by Big Pharma to push the jab?
Zero. Zero.
Is there any sense in which that's true? Is there any sense in which any doctor anywhere in the U.S. gets any kind of money when a patient gets a vaccination?
No. If organizations, if you're running clinical trials, these are often funded by the pharmaceutical companies, but that's not unique to COVID. I mean, this is like a normal way that medications are brought to market, vaccines are brought to market, diagnostic tests are brought to market. The companies need to enroll patients, but no, all the period of time when people were receiving any money, it was during the early stage when the clinical trials were being run in the 2020s. But yeah, once that thing was approved, no, none of us were getting paid to get it. We're all, yeah, it's a complete myth.
So to do a little table setting, I think, one of the reasons we wanted to do this episode is because COVID and Dr. Fauci in particular are back in the news because of his recent appearance in front of the Senate. Or maybe it was a committee in the Senate. I don't know that it was the full Senate. And my understanding is he didn't answer any questions, and I'm not saying that qualitatively. I think he pled the fifth to everything that he was asked. And that, from all signs, caused a lot of hostility and anger in at least a portion of the community. Clayton, why do you think 6 years on there is still so much hostility about the pandemic?
Because it was objectively fucking terrible for everybody, and I don't think any of us are, people have moved on. I don't think anybody's over that. And I think it's left everybody varying degrees of confused, hurt, pissed, betrayed. And, there's been no, I don't feel like there's been any reckoning. Most people I talk to about the other physicians, and we all kind of, when it comes up, we're all like, yeah, well, that was a shit show. And then we just move on. That's about it. We move on and we go our lives because, like, what can we say? All this horrible shit happened. And we all showed up and tried to hold civilization together, despite multiple just noise and just so much background noise and so many mixed messages, and then it just ended, and we're still I think we're all still recovering, but I don't. Dr. Fauci was only one person in a large government infrastructure of basic science and clinical medicine, and I still don't understand why him. It's not clear to me why this guy. Out of other lots of there are army there are bunch of other people involved in the pandemic response and involved in. I don't know if he's the most visible, but I still don't understand the hate towards this guy.
In part, I think it has to be because Donald Trump was actually in charge during much of the pandemic, and you can't hate the orange rapist leader god. So you have to find somebody under him. This is a common thing in a lot of revolutions. In the French Revolution, the first tack was not, Your Majesty, we need to get rid of you because you're a son of a bitch. It's, you're being led astray by your evil advisors.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Fauci was kind of the evil advisor to Trump. This is my theory. Leading him astray, and anything bad happened. And you need a face. You need, it's hard to hate an amorphous collection of institutions and people, but if you can put a face on it, and RFK Jr. did put a face on it with things like the Fauci book. Did you ever read the Fauci book? Like if you read that and believe it, Fauci is the devil.
Yeah. No, I read his autobiography. I read the Fauci's autobiography, and where he outlines and him being a major player in the pandemic response, particularly the clinical and basic science side, being part of Operation Warp Speed, helping craft some of the vaccine preparedness makes a lot of sense, because so much of this response, the actual basic science part, that was made possible by the HIV pandemic, and that ability for our country to react so quickly to this virus from a basic science and clinical standpoint, that was infrastructure that had been built in the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and AH. All that infrastructure came about to try to figure out the HIV pandemic. I think people don't appreciate how much we learned. I mean, the HIV epidemic, we knew cellular immunology was in its absolute infancy as a field, and how it was a horrible way to learn, but how much that pandemic and the basic science trying to figure out care for these infected patients drove modern immunology, modern virology, everything. But no, I'd come to. I read so much. I started out reading self-help in the early days of the pandemic, and also my father died suddenly in 2019. So trying to process the grief of that while everything's on fire, I finally I read so much. I read my way back to psychology and moral philosophy, and I think what it came away with too, with having to have a target. People need certainty. People crave certainty, and so many people cannot sit with uncertainty. And when you are upset, when you're angry, when you're scared, and men in general are fucking terrible at sitting with emotions. Bell Hooks talks about this, like the only simple emotion men can feel is anger. So you see, I see this in healthcare all the time. Like an adult man is scared of medicine, and then it manifests itself as something else. But you also make dog shit decisions when you're afraid or upset or angry, and it's just a feature of our brains. We don't, and this is also a fundamental strategy of rhetorical persuasion. If you keep people upset, if you can gin up constant outrage, no one's going to be able to take a step back and think critically. So I think some of it too is people want certainty, and people feel better if you can blame someone. People just have a very hard time with sitting. It's like, no, dude, nobody made this virus. This shit just happened, and we couldn't do anything about it. Like, this terrible virus most likely just popped out of bats somewhere and made us all damn sick. And that is a thing that happens. That's a thing that we've seen repeatedly in infectious ecology, and bad shit just happens that we can't see, that we can think maybe will come, but it comes, and then there's no one to blame. It happened.
So
it's a
since I'm the
terrible.
least expert, I'm going to continue to play foil to you guys and hopefully kind of earnestly channel some of the questions in the rage.
Yeah,
Because I think you're kind of segueing into, right now we are very much, especially in the US, but I think it's kind of happening worldwide too. We're very much in an age of anti-institution and anti-science and anti-expertise.
yeah,
I think some of that had started before the pandemic, but I
yeah,
certainly think the pandemic exacerbated it. And,
yeah.
one of the things in my memory, and you guys can correct me, I feel like, I don't know if it was necessarily the original sin, but with there being so much distrust in institutions in the first place, and I still think it was probably the right choice. But the early information about masks, right? And there had to have been a decision in some leadership sense that it made more sense to protect the supply for healthcare providers, um, and to not cause a run on supply by scaring the populace, which, looking back, to me, was still the right choice. When we look at what people did with toilet paper and everything else during the pandemic, that was very clearly, to me, the right call. But I do think that it was one of the original sins that caused a lot of distrust in the institution. Thoughts on that, guys?
I maybe, I don't know, because like the messages I was getting as a physician were from other physicians and leaders in the healthcare systems where I worked. When I want to be very careful saying names and saying institutions on this one. I'm
Of course.
findable. I'm findable. Find me, but the where I was working in central Wisconsin when this all blew up was at a fully integrated multi-specialty health system called the Marshfield Clinic. And it was I loved the Marshfield Clinic. My heart's still in Marshfield. We needed to leave when we left, but I love that system because it did so many amazing things, and it had it really, in terms of a research institution, being in a town of 15,000 in Wisconsin, it really punched outside of its weight class and some of the things it did. It had been a center for CDC research on influenza and respiratory syncytial virus for decades, on vaccine safety, on epidemiology, and so dealing with respiratory viruses was absolutely in the DNA of this organization. And so when the shutdown happened in March of 2020, um, leaders in the system told everybody, said, we got this initial message that the benefit of masks is controversial. Um, we know that masks protect you from influenza and respiratory syncytial virus, so we're going to assume that these things work. We can't afford to shut down indefinitely. We are going to prioritize getting a supply of masks for our healthcare providers, and we are going to prioritize getting a diagnostic test up and running. And as soon as we have these things, we are going to open back up for business as usual. And so, and that proved to be right. But the thing I think that frustrated most of us who live in a world of science and medicine is you change your mind. You can change your mind quickly when new information comes about. And that that was never communicated well to the general public. It's like, look, we are working on the plane while it's flying here with in very high stakes situations.
I think your point about building the airplane as you're flying it is true, because I was following the research, and at first it wasn't clear really whether it was an airborne, in terms of like whether it was spread by aerosol or
Mhm.
whether naked viruses in the air, or whether it was a contact-based
Hmm.
virus.
Yeah, I
And
remember
there was
that
a lot of
uncertainty.
research coming out of China, and unless you were looking at on the preprint servers, you weren't seeing any of this stuff. So you had very, very strong opinions by people who don't know the difference between contact and aerosol transmission, by people who don't know the difference between N95, a surgical mask, and a cloth
Hmm.
mask.
Yeah.
It's interesting to note that during the Spanish flu, so in 1918, there were mask mandates in certain places, and people reacted horribly to them as well. And there are photos of people with cloth masks with a hole cut out in them so they can be smoking through their mask, also as a sign of protest. So mask resistance is nothing new.
And so I think there's a fundamental problem that we have in science and medicine, and it's that we all, because of what's expected of us, because of the sacrifice we have to make to do our job, because of what we're tested on, we pretty much drop and move on from liberal arts as soon as we possibly can. And we forget how important these things are. Like, I'm so mad I had to take calculus in college. I never fucking use calculus to solve a problem as a doctor ever, and never have. Now, if you're an engineer, a statistician, calculus is foundational skill set for a doctor. I'd have been far better off with a moral philosophy course and a rhetoric course, because like all the hard problems I have solved as an adult are liberal arts problems. And we when you think about logical persuasion versus rhetorical persuasion, it is so damned hard. It's known to be persuading somebody logically is the most difficult way to persuade people. And for better, for worse, that's where I think the scientific community and the medical community, we all kind of blindsided by just assuming people are going to listen to us logically as expert, and not, no, guys, we also, if we can't believe, if we don't have the media or the politicians or some consistent source doing the rhetorical persuasion for us, like, we have to do it. And so to me, I think some of this too, the problem was we forgot that we have to rhetorically persuade people and patiently explain to them to understand, like, no, we might change what we recommend as new information becomes available.
Back to Jesse's point, which is essentially you were asking, Jesse, did Fauci knowingly misrepresent his position on masks in order to stop a run on masks and keep masks, surgical masks and N95 masks, in stock for the physician community? I think it's possible. I think it's, I'll even, and if I was in his shoes, I would do the same thing. Look at what happened to toilet paper. You couldn't buy toilet paper for love or money. People were stealing toilet paper out of gas station dispensers. Oh, look, there's a roll of toilet paper at work. At work, they had to, like, in the fire department, they had to lock up the toilet paper supplies, and you had to basically request one roll at a time. Now, if, I mean, the public wants certainty. They don't want nuance. They don't want this. We have no data knowing whether surgical masks and N95 masks are effective against COVID-19, but from other research, as Clayton pointed out, it seems likely that it would have some kind of mitigating effect.
Right.
However, your odds of dying are higher if if everyone runs around and starts wearing masks and leaves no masks for the doctors, because then the people who are going to treat you if you get sick aren't going to be available to help treat you. Like, that's a complex, ambiguous, gray thing to say, as opposed to saying, no, I just wash your hands and maintain social distance, and then down the road, okay, there's now data showing that masks work against COVID, because there was data showing that masks work against COVID pretty quickly. I'll say
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
4 or 5 months. I'd have to go review the literature, but within months, there was some pretty good evidence that it was A,
Wow.
airborne, B, aerosol transmitted mostly,
Mhm.
there being a continuum between a naked virus in the air and droplets and aerosols, because if you spew out a droplet, it's eventually going to evaporate into an aerosol, and an aerosol is eventually going to evaporate. So there's a continuum there. There was pretty good data within 3, 4 months if you were paying attention.
So how do you balance it? How do you maintain public trust while not unduly causing panic, right? How do we not create a run on toilet paper, a run on masks? And maybe even to tie it back into some of our, at a more micro level, like, how do we communicate about public health issues at our own school? I tell you, we were dealing with one this week. We had a couple of seemingly unrelated cases of ringworm at the school, and so I'm like, well, do I need to just let that be, or do I need to communicate to the whole school about it and remind everybody, but also potentially cause a panic? And how do we balance that? It's tough. It feels tough at an individual level, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, head coach where I train. He was a elite wrestler, D1 wrestler for a long time. So the wrestling community, he's pretty blunt and non-judgmental and communicates to the school. And I know it's on Here Where I Train, and I'm not naming my school right now because this is such a politically charged topic. These things represent my opinions and not my school. So please don't come to my gym looking for beef. It's a simple message on Facebook, to our private the private community. It's like, hey gang, we have this, couple grapplers are off the mat treating, infections. Please remember to check your skin, shower, do all the basic cleanliness things. We clean our mats after coaches, make sure you clean the mats after every single practice. Even if there's one coming up, clean the mat. So, it's a neutral reminder of simple. I feel like it's persuasive because it's a neutral reminder to a tight community of our community responsibility to each other. I feel like, and that's how I feel like my head coach handles that very well when it happens. And it's like, I'll go show Clayton your rash. So, I mean, handy if you have a dermatologist in your gym, but
You called that the mask, the potential, lying or omission or fudging about masks, the original sin. But I think that's the original sin, perhaps. But the one that always gets thrown up is, they said that vaccination, if you got vaccinated, you could not get it. And then if you got vaccinated, you could not transmit it. And now you can get it and you can transmit it. And it's like, man, do you not remember your timelines? Because in the original variant and in the Delta variant, that was mostly true. That was like 95% true. By the time you got the Omicron and the children of Omicron, that stopped being true. And they stopped more or less saying it. There was a delay, took a while for 80-year-old politicians to catch up to the science of a month or two. They're busy running, Biden's busy running the country and not reading the latest abstracts of transmission studies. But that thing that vaccination meant you could not get it was true when they said it. And then it changed. It's like saying, no, you don't have to, Jesse, your house is not in danger of burning down. And then a month later, when conditions have changed and it's I'm trying to think in Fahrenheit here because you're both Yanks, it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit out there and 20% humidity. Now your house is in danger of burning down. You lied! You said that my house would never burn down. I said that a month ago when it was true.
And this is, I feel like I could explain to someone in plain English how presidents get briefed by experts, and I mean, you're right, Stephan, but it's like people had to learn a lot of immunology on the fly, right? Like, the ancestral strain, the first vaccine against that spike protein that made the thing so virulent. I mean, the original vaccine, it was such an amazing vaccine for that strain. It was damn near sterile immunity. However, those viruses, part of their biology, they change the shape of those things. And then once they change their shape, your advanced memory immune system doesn't perfectly recognize that shape anymore. And then so that was a Delta variant. The Delta variant was still closely related to, but here comes the nuance, right? Like, okay, the Delta variant, now we have a new strain. However, now we see that vaccination still protects you. Yes, you can still get it and transmit it, but you aren't anywhere near as sick. And then here comes this fucking Omicron variant, and cases are surging. But even though it wasn't a very good match to the vaccine still, there were still structural pieces, and then explaining some of the complexity of a vaccine. Like an immune response isn't a single thing. Like a monoclonal antibody, a new variant monoclonal is useless. A monoclonal is like for one, like 5 amino acid piece of the virus, right? But your mammalian immune system, you have memory to a lot of different chunks of what that S protein. So explain to people, no, now you can get it, but the difference now is like now you're home with a sniffle instead of on the ventilator, right? And so we all had to learn to teach people. I was having to try to learn to teach people basic immunology and basic virology and basic microbiology in real time in clinic, because I was practicing face-to-face medicine during all this, and just man, people were freaked out. Oh my God, people were so freaked out.
Well, and that's one of the things that amazed me is, I very clearly remember people looking for solutions, right? We had, what was the first, hydroxychloroquine or whatever, and then the ivermectin nonsense. Like, people were looking for, but then when it was provided, they went with the kooky science instead of the actual science. And
it's because of the fear mongering around vaccination, which has been around for hundreds of years. Like this idea that vaccines are somehow different from the rest of medicine.
Yeah.
When really they're like a workout in a syringe. They're like that. Maybe that's how we should have sold it, dude. In the jiu-jitsu community, dude.
Supplement.
Yeah, you're willing to inject peptides, growth hormone, fucking testosterone,
get your immune system swole.
Yes, exactly. This is just like a workout. It'll make your immune system sore, and then your immune system will get stronger. Like that.
I know I thought I could get more stuff read before this podcast, but Operation Warp Speed is it's an amazing book that sort of talks about the people and the policies and everything that led to getting such an effective vaccine to market. Like researchers in China released the genome, which is the sequence of the blueprint of the virus, beginning of January 2020. Like they sequenced, they put it out there in the public, so scientists access. So within a couple of weeks, Moderna and Pfizer had both designed mRNA vaccines in that sequence against the gene encoding the spike protein. Within 2 weeks, you already had two vaccine candidates, kind of forward thinking, and then but. This piece of legislation, in my opinion, I got to give credit due. This is the single most amazing thing from the Trump administration, and this should have been.
And it's the one thing they're trying to disavow.
And it should have been an absolute win, because they could look and say, "Hey, look at what conservative governance can do when things are going to hell." But so much of that base is so powerfully anti-vax. So if you figure approval rating in the US 30-35%, like these are ride or die people, and so figure, okay, if there's 35% approval rating right now, figure 1 in 3 Americans, people in the US is going to probably be anti-vax. And so the Republican Party couldn't utilize that amazing scientific and public health win, because it was like anathema that the solution was a vaccine to so much of the base.
I wonder, do you think we shared too much science? Like I'm sitting here thinking about, like, God, that mRNA nonsense was just out of sorts. And I look back to things like Prozac. Like in the general public sphere, nobody was talking about SSRIs. They were like, hey, let's just be less depressed, right?
No.
And I think it's that rhetorical versus logical that you were talking about earlier. I'm wondering, because to most people, the mRNA stuff seemed so new, when in fact it was a technology that had been around for a long time.
A while.
Since the 1980s.
Yeah.
The first trials on that were done in animals in the 80s. And, there was a paper published in 2017 or 2018, so before COVID came out.
Yeah.
That was an amazing, I think it was in Nature, and it was an amazing review paper of the history of mRNA vaccine research. And basically they were like, we are right at the cusp of being able to use this now in actual live settings. So 1 or 2 years before COVID came along, this was a state of the thing. So we got so bloody lucky that because if this hadn't been around, millions and millions more people would have died. And the thing is, a lot of these always Trumpers, a lot of this 30% that's still supporting Trump right now, they tend to be old. And they might be anti-vax now, but you know what? They went and got their first couple of shots because they were 70 years old and they were watching their friends die and they got scared. And so now it's safe to be anti-vax now that you've gotten through this.
Right.
But, Trump got vaccinated. RFK, all these guys got vaccinated.
Rand Paul got vaccinated.
Yeah.
And this is something that Stephan and I have talked about offline, but I would be really interested to hear your take on it. Coming into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, my understanding was that one of the things that made it so popular was that it was evidence-based, right? We saw in the UFC that BJJ worked, and so there was this kind of scientific backing behind it, right? And so I always kind of was working up until 2020 under the assumption that that was solid footing in where my head was at. And then 2020 happened, and I'm like, how can this entire community that is so driven by evidence-backed martial arts, right? How can they go from evidence-backed martial arts to completely rejecting evidence-based medicine?
I mean, this is pure speculation, Jesse, but I would my speculation would be because BJJ is fun and it's accessible and it's much easier to understand. The directly observable, it's much easier to understand getting a hold of someone, holding them down and choking them. That's much simpler concept to understand than, okay, we're going to take this genetic blueprint and we're going to stabilize this genetic blueprint with some chemicals, and then we're going to inject this piece into you, and then your body is going to make some of that stuff, and then your immune system is going to learn to recognize that. It's just like getting a shot's not fun, and nobody knows what the fuck RNA actually is, or a T cell, and this is just like the language of my daily job. But like I've thought about this, like, oh damn, no, most people don't have. You're not going to have any handle on immunology unless if you get any microbiology, immunology, it's a sophomore or junior year or a senior year undergrad. You have to be about halfway through college in either a nursing or a medicine track to actually get meaningfully exposed to that content. And but yeah, like grappling. I mean, most people who are drawn, everybody's wrestled, everybody's rolled around before with a cousin or their sibling, and if you see this little Brazilian dude in a karate outfit, like whipping everybody's ass, like that's so much more easy to understand, I think, to people. But then once you actually have access to it, it's fun. I mean, it's fun. It's a lot of fun for people. I just think it's easier to sell people on the evidence-based supporting BJJ because the accessibility and the relatability is to sell them on. You're going to get the shot. You're going to probably feel like shit. You're not going to die of this disease. Trust me.
And evidence-based, I mean, what do we mean by evidence-based? In a jiu-jitsu or martial arts context, we mean a couple of things. We mean, I watched Royce Gracie fight guys in the octagon and he won. I watched John Jones do the oblique kick and hurt some guy's knee, therefore the oblique kick works. And I went to the gym and I tried this move and it worked, right? That it's something I see it with my eyes and I feel it with my body. Mm-hmm. That's very different from what we mean by evidence-based in science. We did this massive epidemiological study. What's an epidemiological study? Well, okay. Let me now give you an hour breakdown of what an epidemiological study is. Then we controlled for, so that we weren't finding correlations where none exist by going on a data fishing expedition. What's a data fishing expedition? What's p-hacking? What is significance? You mean you didn't meet these 100,000 people that you were drawing data from and then putting it into a giant spreadsheet and putting it through incredibly sophisticated statistical programs and then submitting it to a journal and then having it peer reviewed and then getting it published? And then that's so different. Yeah, that's still evidence-based, but that's very, very different evidence from hey, I got the guy's arm and I got his head and I dropped my weight and I squeezed and the guy tapped out. Yeah. That's a small digestible chunk that doesn't require bloody 4 to 10 years of university training to be able to understand vaguely the steps of.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you guys. So at these hearings, Fauci basically said, basically pleaded the fifth on every single question. Why, if he has nothing to hide, why would he do that? Why would he just answer the questions?
Stephan, I'm not a legal scholar, man. I can basically repeat things that people like Heather Cox Richardson have said. So
I've been out of town. I've been communing with black flies, so I don't know what Heather Cox Richardson has said on this topic.
She's amazing. But my understanding from people that other content experts I trust is that the fear. Dr. Fauci and his legal advisors, the fear is that he says something they can trap him in perjury in Congress. That's sort of it's like the pardon only grants him so much, and then this is a chance to get him to say something that they could go after him for that's not part of the pardon. That's my understanding. Jesse, did you make?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's the same thing that they tried to get Comey on before the whole 86-47 nonsense. I think they were trying to, and this is why it seemed like it was in bad faith to me, right? If we were really interested as a culture, as a country, as a community, to really have a post-mortem about COVID, we would do something akin to the J6 committee, right? Yeah. But the fact that Rand Paul picked one guy to get up there and harangue, it was very clearly in bad faith. But it's also really easy to tell that story where you ask the question that Stephan asked of well, hey, he's already been pardoned. Why can't he just answer the questions? Yeah. Right. But I think that's absolutely right. I think it was an attempt to trap him so that they could have a spectacle trial and charges filed and, which we just see time and time again with this administration. There's just a constant stream of them. And he was going to be, and they're still trying to do it. The fact that he was refusing to ask questions, they're now looking to move to contempt proceedings. They're trying to get him however they can get him. And it has nothing to do with COVID, quite frankly.
Yeah, they were hard to watch. I was watching them the hearings, trying to figure out, what are you guys actually trying to figure out? Are you charging him with anything? Is there a specific accusation? And I listening to them, I could not find a single coherent accusation of something he did wrong. It just looked like fraternity hazing, honestly, And
maybe it's just a way for people like Rand Paul to get in front of a camera and boost their public image, right?
And distract from pedophilia.
This is true. The interesting thing about the Fauci hearings is that the president still hasn't, that the administration still hasn't released half of the Epstein files that they were mandated to in November of last year. Like
Yeah,
that's the interesting thing.
I guess I don't understand what Senator Paul gets out of this. I think of him as being I don't think he is analyzed to be at risk in the is he running again in the midterms, or is he retiring? Because I think of him and McConnell as both. I mean, assuming McConnell survives his current illness, but like I think of both those guys as being analyzed as in pretty safe Senate seats in Kentucky. You know, despite electing what sounds like a pretty popular Democrat governor. I don't know. I can't figure out what he gets out of this, you know, and so it just.
I don't know that it's a direct thing. I think it's probably an indirect pat on the top of the head from Trump. I don't necessarily think it has anything directly related to his stature as a senator. But it does bring me to, I think, one of the next things that we need to talk about, which was one of the huge flare-ups during the pandemic, which was the accusation of, and there seems to be some substance behind it, but the accusation that there was stifled speech about the lab leak theory during the pandemic, right? That Facebook wasn't allowed, you know, they had to pull posts down, or Twitter wasn't allowed to do this, or, and, you know, so we've got all the free speech absolutists talking about how, well, we weren't even allowed to talk about the lab leak theory.
But this is also published, right? Like this goes back to the gain of function research, which has been done for influenza for a while now, with a lot of very robust protections in place to mitigate the risk of a germ getting out of the lab. Like, this is not a new thing, but the laboratory strains that were used for studying coronaviruses, and labs have been studying coronaviruses for a while, because there were a couple of SARS-CoV outbreaks that happened, one in 2003, 2004, I don't know, 2012. Like, there were a couple of these things that popped out, made people very sick, didn't get very far because they were super contagious, but these things definitely, because, you know, in the epidemiology, public health world, influenza was the one everybody's worried about, right? Like, influenza is the one where they know about, like, there's yearly flu strain circulating. We've had one terrible flu pandemic. We've had some bad ones, but not like 1918. So flu is studied. Like, a lot of these things are well worked out for influenza, but like COVID actually got on the same radar, and everybody's like, oh shit, no, this could happen. This could cause this too, but it just wasn't it didn't ever seem to get the same kind of biological traction that influenza did in the ecology of our, you know, viral infections of the world. But the SAR, what I call the ancestral strain, I think it's SARS-CoV-2. I think that's also called, but like, that strain's been sequenced. It looks nothing like. The sequence is nothing like the laboratory strains. It's really far distant from those things. I kind of sent Jesse a text about this. I said, imagine me you think about different ancestry and looking nothing alike. Imagine me trying to use Steve Kwan's ID to buy beer, right? It's like, we look nothing. We're both clearly humans, and we look nothing alike. There's no chance in hell that they're going to sell me beer using Stephen Kwan's ID, you know? So that's kind of the same with viruses, right? And so this thing based the closest related, and it's like 97% sequence homology in the genome, and this is published in the scientific literature, you know. But this thing is most closely related to a strain they found in bats in Wuhan, and is actually pretty similarly related to one they found in pangolins too, which is like a weird armadillo they eat in some parts of the world. But like the lab leak thing. Is it plausible? Sure. Sure, it's possible. It's entirely possible. But like, really rigorous studies have been done to show that this is like, no, this is not what happened. You know, and so.
Well, to me,
this is certainly like your point there, Clayton. You're approaching this from a scientific point of view, and I think the scientific consensus it's probably, I don't know, among virologists, is something like 95% of virologists think that this is a natural strain.
Yeah.
It's something like that. And the research has basically borne that out. But that wasn't Jesse's question. Jesse's question is, why weren't we allowed to talk about this? And we were allowed to talk about this in the scientific literature, but the way that 90% of people get their information is not from the scientific literature.
Right.
It's from fucking Facebook or
Yeah.
Instagram or Twitter. So why wasn't Twitter allowing you to talk about the lab leak? Why were you getting shadow banned for talking about the lab leak on Facebook? And I don't have a good answer to that.
I don't either, because God knows, I don't think any of these social.
I actually think I do have an answer. And this is, to me, I never took this argument in good faith because, there was the end, there was the side about, the plandemic. This was planned and this was, and it was a lab leak. But the same people were also being like, oh, this is just a fucking cold. It's, this is no big deal. So again, the whole argument to me was always in bad faith. But it gave people an, excuse to, the right wing, the conservative movement is being censored in social media. And, there was that whole bit. But if you all remember, and I think this is actually why there was some controls put on it, is there very quickly became, it was very apparent that there was a ton of anti-Asian, anti-Chinese sentiment.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No.
Right. And that ended up being what the result of. Nobody was trying to hold anybody in the government accountable for financing gain of function research. They didn't even know what the fuck that meant.
No.
But the fact that they couldn't be mad at Chinese people and talk about it on Facebook, that was something they could be mad about.
Yeah. And I've had to relearn. I actually had really good civics classes in high school, but the problem is, like, it's all taught in such a boring manner without things that are actually going on. And none of us remember basic civics from high school, but the thing people fail to understand is, like, a private company can decide what you can and can't talk about in their space. This freedom of speech in the U.S., like, it theoretically protects you from the government coming after you. It doesn't, Mark Zuckerberg and the Facebook team, they can decide what content they want on they're a private company. They can do that. So why can't you talk about that? Because they decided you can't, and they're a private company, and that's the fucking, that they can do that.
Yes, but it became such a grift in conservative media. The Twitter files that Matt Taibbi released, and
which were a big nothing burger.
It was a big nothing burger, but they probably did throttle some of it because at the time they were trying to be a little bit more socially responsive.
I don't know. I find the idea of free speech absolutism to be so incredibly naive, and
disingenuous.
It's disingenuous. Like, free speech absolutism. Really, if I come up to your daughter and tell her that I'm going to murder her in a painful and slow way, I'm just using words. You're not going to react. That's just my free speech. No, you're gonna chop my head off with an axe, as you should, right? If I yell fire in a crowded theater.
If I start publishing your flight plans and where your airplanes go, your private jets go on Twitter, right? I mean, that was the immediate kind of backlash to the
Elon,
yes,
self-professed free speech absolutist, except when it comes to me. So it's so, you have a right. I mean, in general, not what's legislated. You have a right to free speech, but every right runs into other rights, right? My right to swing my fists ends where your nose begins, right? Because my right to do what I want with my body runs into your right to have bodily autonomy. So we have these conflicting rights. It's an interesting thing. And again, back to Clayton's point about civics class and basic moral philosophy being important things here.
What can we do? What can we do to get people believing in scientific expertise again? I don't know that continuing to defend kind of broken institutions, because it's all tied together. But I do think that we have got to figure out a way to get back to accepting, admiring, putting up on a pedestal expertise, and in particular, medical and scientific expertise. That is what has gotten us to be able to do things like have a podcast, right?
Mhm.
None of this would be possible without relying on expertise. I couldn't drink. I mean, we're seeing it in the U.S. right now. I have to be careful about what I'm eating right now because of all of the
Yeah, lettuce is trying to murder us.
food safety shit. If we
Yeah.
don't have expertise that we can fall back on, we're in big fucking trouble.
I'm not sure there's a good answer to this, Jesse, because in previous eras where, trust in science was established, there was more of a monolithic messaging. There wasn't the internet, and there wasn't this information siloing, and there wasn't this algorithm telling you whatever the hell that you want to hear. If I go online and search 10 reasons to not trust the government on let's just say YouTube, but this is true on all the platforms. And then I search times government covered up health crises. And then I search mistakes U.S. government made in mistakes the U.S. government has made. My YouTube algorithm will be completely shifted, and you will within a couple of weeks forever, and I will be inundated with I'll be an anti-vaxxer, I'll be a anti-fluoride, I'll be a flat earther, I'll be a contrail guy. The contrail thing drives me fucking crazy. Like, fuel plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide and water. Fuel plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide and water. If you put water into a cold environment, it turns into a cloud. Go outside on a cold day, exhale, watch a contrail. That's happening at 30,000 feet. And to watch former martial arts instructors of mine losing their minds about contrails over Southern California, it's just so disheartening, man. But it's almost not their fault because they're in some bloody algorithm where contrails and flat earth and anti-fluoride and anti-vax and
and I mean,
it was one thing after another.
It was one thing after another during the pandemic. I mean, even talking about it reminds me of things. You remember there was a coin shortage, if I recall, right? And the conspiracy is like, oh, they're trying to take away our paper money so that they can digitize it and move to crypto. And none of this stuff actually came to pass. But
nanometal tracking chip or nanobot tracking chips in the vaccines. Remember those?
Like they're in your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they're not in the vaccine. They're in your phone.
I will give you a choice.
Oh, and the 5G.
That's right. 5G. 5G was causing COVID. I remember that. Clayton, I'll give you a choice to your point. You're the overlord. You're the secret guy. You're the guy in the Star Chamber. You're the guy smoking the cigar in the back room. You're the guy controlling the president. Stroking a cat.
I have 2 doctorates. I got a resume for that.
So you can either put a tracking chip into my body with a nanobot technology that doesn't exist to see where I am using a COVID vaccine. Or you can take my phone and you can see not only where I am, but what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, the porn I'm watching, the things I'm thinking about buying, the medical conditions I have, the relationships I have, how I'm dealing with you can tell everything about me, or you can know where I am with this imaginary tracking chip that doesn't exist. Give me a break.
Oh, yeah, you're right, dude. The data on the phone is so much more intimate and valuable, and God, but this is one of the reasons why I'm I'm willing to, I come on these podcasts I would imagine the people who are listening to the Fighting Matters podcast are probably what they call fellow travelers. There's probably a lot of what I'm doing is preaching to the choir, but I don't know. Maybe they're the 30%. I don't know. I don't think I can reach them. I just don't, unless, and I don't know how bad things have to get for people to personally experience shit to change their mind. I just don't. But maybe we have some people who aren't sure who are watching this. Maybe, and I've literally come on here, not just this, but on episode 198 for BJJ Mental Models to try to educate people how to reduce their chance of getting sick from things that are kind of occupational hazards of our sport. And the thing that kind of resonates with me, and Steve had a woman, a PhD scientist, on this podcast talking about kind of how to tell if you're being scammed, and I love that episode. But another fairly famous grappler, shortly after the episode where BJJ Mental Models brought an expert onto his Instagram feed, talk about this. And it's the old white guy. He's got the white lab coat and the glasses, and I mean, I don't look like a doctor. I look like a shaved gorilla, but like he, the first thing he fucking tries to do is sell people a damn dilute hypochlorite spray. And it's like, man, so I've come on multiple of these. I'm not trying to sell you people shit. And that's persuasive. That's, I've got no financial interest in this. I just want you all to be able to enjoy the sport without getting sick. And I want you to be able to enjoy the sport without making other people sick. And that's it. That's it. So that, I'm trying to engage with our community as with my knowledge and expertise to just share the information. I got nothing to sell you.
And I know we're getting close to the hour, but that made me, it's something you just talked about when we were talking about evidence-based. Jiu-jitsu is very much direct experience, right? You bundle their head and arm up and squeeze and they tap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we saw a lot of that in COVID too, in terms of people, if they don't have direct experience of a thing, it must be fake news. I don't know anybody that's died from COVID. I don't know anybody that's gotten sick. I know I've heard about 2 people that, whatever it is. And how do we get past if I have not directly felt it, touched it, seen it, it must not be real? Can we get past it?
That is there's a lot of research showing that that's a split between conservative and liberal. That conservative people tend to only care about things that they directly experience, which really means the people that they know. So something like, I don't know, drug addiction treatment shouldn't exist until somebody in their immediate circle ends up with a drug addiction, and then that changes their mind. And sometimes you see this a little bit with LGBT things, right?
Yeah, they absolutely do.
Sometimes, it's not all conservative people change their minds about this when somebody in their family comes out as gay, but it does happen, right? Dick Cheney, horrible, bloody person, is kind of an example of that. Whereas liberal people tend to have a wider circle that they care about. And so I don't know what the answer there is. Because, in the early days of COVID, I didn't know anyone who had died, or I didn't know anyone who had COVID, but I still cared that there were thousands of people,
bodies stacking
dead
up in New York City.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
I didn't know any of the people in New York City who had died. I didn't know anyone in Italy who had died, but I still cared about it.
Well, just my wife and my wife is also a PhD scientist who studies Lyme disease, and I just remember before. When things were just starting to get bad in China, before things got here, and you could see China was trying to get shit under control, and you could see, like, all of a sudden China's carbon footprint massively drop. When I saw that, I told my wife, I was like, honey, this is going to be bad. It's like, if this is like, China's a manufacturing and financial, they're an absolute world power. And this, whatever the hell's going on there is dropping their carbon footprint this much. Like, this is going to be bad. I don't know how bad or when we're seeing it, but like, it just,
That
I don't know.
actually, you mentioning your wife reminded me of something else that got said in the media recently by our lovely HHS secretary. Um, Secretary Kennedy claimed that I think both RSV and Lyme disease were a result of gain of function research, which
No,
no, of
no,
course not, right?
fucking
But he
no.
said
God
this
damn it,
during an interview,
no.
which is
God damn it.
absolutely
Dude,
insane.
Lyme disease, that Borrelia burgdorferi is such a bitch to culture. That is a really difficult microbe to work with. And that damn thing was, figured out. We didn't, I don't even, God damn that. Uh, sorry,
No, I know, but I
sorry.
mean, I think it's important. People hear these things and it's said so matter of factly that people assume it's true. And I think it's important that,
It's a
especially while
gishgalop
we've
of
got,
bullshit.
it is
It
absolutely
takes,
that.
so it's bullshit. So it travels around, it can be generated way, way, way faster than it can be refuted. And
Here's
it travels so much further before the truth gets out.
Yeah, and here's the other thing with the ancestral COVID strain, and just with microbes in general, right? You can genetically manipulate a microbe a lot of different ways. It really depends on the microbe. There are genetic fingerprints when you genetically alter the thing. The tools we have for altering a coronavirus genome are well described. And if you change things in them using those techniques, you can find the genetic signature of that manipulation. They were utterly absent in the ancestral strain. And so I don't know. It's like, how do you, I can tell people that, but it's just, it's logic, not belief, right? Because nobody knows what the fuck that means. I'm talking about, right? But it's like, yeah, you could put a pair of breasts on me, but there's going to be surgical footprints and silicone bags in my chest, right? Like it's kind of that with like you do things to biological systems. You can see the marks of your work.
People understand this idea of footprints because that was actually the first conspiracy that I ran into, that COVID was genetically engineered. About a month into this thing, it was a couple of weeks after China released the genome of the virus. My brother called me to tell me that they had found that the SARS-CoV-2 had been designed and had pieces of the AIDS virus put into it. And this was interesting, so I looked into it, and yes, it turns out that it did have a same sequence. I don't know how many nucleotides long, call it that 20 nucleotides long. That's the same as in the AIDS virus. And that but the catch is this sequence exists in something like 70 or 80% of all viruses and all bacteria and all fungi and all living beings.
Right.
So yeah, it's got a similarity. It's also got a lot of carbon in it. The AIDS virus has carbon, and the SARS-CoV-2 has carbon. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well,
and hydrogen.
There's all the evidence we need.
Yeah, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Imagine that. What are the odds?
Yeah, but you're right, man. Like how deeply you have to dig into the actual, someone can literally just say, you can take something like that. That's like, it's technically true. It's based on a thing that exists, but then the burden of proof to explain, you just gave a mini lecture on some conserved piece of nucleic information, some piece of genomic information that's conserved because we're all made of the same stuff and we all more or less replicate ourselves the same way, right?
But we used to live in a world where I didn't need to understand that because I knew that Clayton had done his work and I could trust what he was telling me. And we have lost that.
Yeah.
I haven't lost it, but as a culture, we have lost it. And to
thank
me,
you, social media.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
And thank you, undermining of education, especially in the U.S.,
Yep.
for the last 30 to 40 years. If this is what you get when you destroy basic public education, when you then have people who've already gone through it playing down the importance of secondary education, right? Well, you shouldn't go to university, says the guy with 2 university degrees. And then this is what happens when you when you make basic science political, amplify it with runaway social media algorithms that can spread bullshit at a lightning speed. And man, I don't know how we get back from here. I mean, I think getting rid of social media would be a good start. Good luck, though. That's my recommendation.
Well,
Well, on that note, I think we have upset each other enough for the hour. This has been an amazing conversation, Clayton. I'm so glad you made it back on. If
man.
you are willing for people to find you, tell us where they can do that.
I'm not doing it on this episode.
How can I have you check my rash?
I'm not licensed in Kentucky. I'm only licensed in New York, and I'm licensed in Wisconsin. If my situation here changes, I'll be licensed and interstate medical compact, and it's a lot more options. But right now, I just watch the other 2 episodes. You can find me. I'm findable. I just I feel like I stayed on the rails. I didn't cuss anybody or hate on anybody, but like, man,
I thought you were great.
You're everybody out there. This was really this whole experience. Like a lot of smart, dedicated people. I know a number of people that walked away from medicine at the end of this. Just I kind of feel like at Gen X mentally, in my mind, I'm still trying to land kickflips. I'm still running from the police after the party was, busted. But I look in the mirror and there's this guy with a gray beard. And I think a lot of us who are still showing up to work, like we feel like, and maybe this is just normal adult experience. Like I feel like I'm trying to fucking hold civilization together, and that may just be every professional in their 50s right now. And there's so much uncertainty and there's so much nonsense and there's so much noise and there's so much mixed messaging. And damn, just like this was rough on us, and fair, doctors and nurses, people died, you lost some, and this will almost certainly happen again, right? With climate change and with displacement of people and with erosion of public health infrastructure. Like I was preparing for this, and the shit that's happened that I just like forgot about after COVID. I'd forgotten about West Nile. I'd forgotten about Zeke. I'd forgotten about all this shit. And right now we have an Ebola outbreak. And, and our federal government is actually
to say nothing of measles.
Yeah, measles coming back. But just this stuff is not gone. And so just, I guess, keep in mind that, your doctors, there's a lot of things that are, we're better off than a lot of people want away. But like, this is a really freaking difficult job. And it's gotten even harder with, but I don't know.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate you all and everything that you.
Yeah.
Stephan, how about you? How can we find you and support you?
Grapplers for the jiu-jitsu side and Essential Wilderness for the running around and looking for wolverines and caribou side. But and again, I want to echo what Jesse was saying. Thank you, Clayton. I think this was undeniably a really, really difficult time for anyone involved in healthcare and in, especially with a background in biochemistry, molecular biology, microbiology. Oh my God, to watch the bullshit flying through the average episode of every Joe Rogan show and just wanting to tear your hair out was.
I mean, he did. You can see it on screen.
Yeah. I can't watch him. I don't watch him. I can't. I don't know. There's so much noise, and every outlet's competing for your attention, competing your clicks, and keeping you upset is a really great way to do that. And I also feel very privileged, and I know how to look for information. I know how to weigh in in my profession. I know I know where to find this information. I know, and I've been on journal editorial boards. I've reviewed I've done a ton of peer reviewed journals. Like, I know how to find information, and I feel bad for so many people who you're just getting bombarded with everybody who's like trying to compete by keeping you pissed or scared or upset or promising you easy solutions for things that aren't actually easy. And so I just think people that don't know how to critically think or haven't learned to critically think, like, I don't know how many times people have to be hurt or scammed before they learn how to sort through nonsense and how to eliminate some of the noise to make decent decisions about just life, anything, health, finance, any of these things, you know?
Look to the experts and stop looking to the grifters.
You know? Yeah. But
well, everyone, that's another
guys.
Good episode of Fighting Matters. Thank you all to all the listeners, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jesse.
everybody.
Stephan, good to meet you, buddy. Just thanks, sir.